the Yellow Medicine East School District School Board meeting for December 13th to order. First item on our agenda is, as always, Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And then we'll do roll call of board members. Start with Director Zempel.
Matt Zempel.
Sharon Rupp.
Jeremy LeBlanc.
Amanda Lisi.
Ron Winter.
Thank you. Next item is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? I have no changes.
Motion to approve the agenda by Zempel.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second by Odegaard.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Reading of the YME mission statement, and I will do that tonight. Our mission is to provide a caring environment of high expectations that prepares every student for a successful future and instills the value of learning. Next item is public address to the Board of Education. Nothing in person, nothing addressed, okay. Next item is item number 7, our consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda, which includes approval of meeting minutes from the November 15th meeting, approval of payment for claims, approval of finance report, approval of the enrollment report, approval of our membership renewal with the Grand Falls Area Chamber of Commerce, which is an annual renewal, and also approval of fiscal year 22 transportation agreement with Central Minnesota Christian, which is an annual renewal. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the consent agenda by Zempel.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Amanda Lisi was second.
Thank you. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Then item number 8, we're on to reports. First up is our Truth and Taxation hearing with Jeremy Wilcox.
Good evening.
Evening.
I think you guys have a copy.
Is your microphone on? Okay,
Now
thank you.
it is. So I think you guys have a PowerPoint in front of you. So this will start the Truth and Taxation public hearing for taxes payable in 2022. Minnesota state law requires that we have a public meeting, that it starts after 6 p.m. and is between the dates of November 25th and the 28th. We need to present the current year budget, proposed property tax levy, and specific purposes and reasons for increases. The agenda, I'll go through a little bit of background on school funding, the district's budget, and the district's proposed tax levy for taxes payable in 2022, and then open it up for public comments. The next slide, that's just the Minnesota Constitution. I won't read through that, but they set the funding limits for public schools. Next slide, funding is highly regulated. The state sets formulas which determine the revenue. Most revenue is based on specific amounts per pupil unit. The state sets tax policies for local schools, and then they set the maximum authorized property tax levy. Districts can levy less, but not more than the authorized amount by the state. States also authorize school boards to submit referendums for operating and capital needs for voter approval. The next slide, let's see. Changes in tax levy does not determine the changes in budget. So tax levy is based on many state-determined formulas plus voter-approved formulas. Some changes in tax levies are revenue neutral, so those don't result in more revenue based off of the change in the law. And then expenditure budgets are limited by state set voter approved levies and fund balance. And an increase in school tax does not correlate to an equal increase in expenditure budget. School districts levy cycle is different from the county and the city. The city, their budget year is a calendar year. So for the 22 taxes provided, that's revenue for their 22 calendar year. The school, our budget is July 1st, and that runs with the school year. So the 2021 taxes provide revenue for our fiscal year 22 year. Budget information, our school district has 7 funds, and those are listed there. We have the general food service, community service, debt service, custodial fund, our OPEB revocable trust, and then our OPEB debt service fund. The next 2 slides are just kind of an overview of what is underneath each of those funds, and I won't go through those. We'll talk a little bit further about some of those changes, the bigger changes in some of those funds. So I'm on slide 11. That's just a graph that shows our district enrollment, that we are still declining in enrollment. Slide 12, this is our district revenues and expenditures. So we have our actual from fiscal year 21. Our total funds, we had revenues of $12,943,000 roughly, and then expenditures of $13,027,000 for a fund balance of $3,897,000. Our budget this coming fiscal year 22, we're looking at revenues of about $11,660,000 with expenditures of $12,253,000 roughly. The next slide is just a breakout of category, so where that funding is coming from. We've got our local, which is the tax levy and the credits. We've got miscellaneous local revenue, state and federal. So then on the right, you can see that's our $11,660,000. The expenses broken out by category: salaries and benefits, purchase services, supplies, capital, safety, LTFM, and long-term debt, showing a total of the $12,252,000. And so we're looking at a budget deficit of $592,000 for fiscal year 22. Slide 15, this is just breaking out those numbers a little further in a pie chart. So that's our revenues, our budgeted revenues of $11,660,000. So you can see that the majority of that is coming from the state. Some of the things included in the miscellaneous local would be our gate fees, interest, grants and donations. And then there's also federal and local revenues. So I'm on slide 16. This is the budgeted expenditures. Again, the majority of our expenditures come from the general fund, and then you can just see that they're broken out by the other funds there too. Slide 17, this is our operating fund, so that's going to include general, food service, and community education. A majority of that, so 75% of our operating expenditures are salaries and benefits. And then we've got supplies and miscellaneous and purchase services, which that would include our coaches, our refs, and the transportation. Slide 18.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
On that purchase services, does that also include MVCC, or is that part of the salaries and benefits?
MVCCs gets included in salaries and benefits.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. The levy cycle, so this is certified 2022, pay 2020, sorry, certified 2021, pay 22 for fiscal year 23. So in December of 2021, the school board adopts the final levy. In May of 22 and October of 22, the property owners are paying their taxes that the county remits then to the school district. And then the school district records the collected revenue in calendar 22 for fiscal year 23. A little background on property tax. We all know every owner of taxable property pays property taxes for various taxing jurisdictions. Each taxing jurisdiction sets its own levy, most often based on limits set by the state, and each county then sends out bills collecting taxes from property owners. And then that gets distributed back to the tax jurisdictions. A couple key dates. So September 8th, Minnesota Department of Education prepared and distributed the first draft of the levy, setting the maximum authorized levy as permitted by law. And then on September 13th, the board approved that proposed levy at the maximum allowed. Mid-November, each county then mails out their proposed tax statements. And then December 13th, now we are holding the public hearing on proposed levy held by Wyoming School District as required by law at the Truth in Taxation meeting. So following the hearing, school board will certify the final levy amounts at its regular meeting. The next slide, so slide 21, that's just a comparison between our final 21 levy and then what we're proposing for 22. And this is just the general fund, so you see that we've got, that's decreasing 49,000, and we'll go into some of the reasons for that in a few slides. The next slide is our community service fund. That we're up about 40,000 for proposed from the fiscal year 21. And then debt redemption, that's down about 3,000. So slide 24, an overview of the proposed levy payable in 22. The proposed property tax levy for all funds will decrease from pay 21 about 0.48%, so about $12,000. Law requires that school districts explain the reason for these changes, and I'll go into those in the next slides here. So the general fund levy changes, we lump those together. It's about $49,000 less. And there's a number of different reasons for this. We did have an increase in referendum, and that's kind of the inflationary factor that some of that is. Career and technical, facilities and equipment bond adjustment and operating capital. And we did see a decrease in integration and achievement, in our LOR, local optional revenue, unemployment, Q-comp, leases, school safety, and LTFM. So combining all those, it was a decrease of 49,000. The community service changes, that was an increase of about 40,000. ECFE, that's our under 5 population, increased one. That wasn't a huge amount. The largest amount was the swimming pool, which increased that levy 47,000 almost due to major repairs last year. And then the community service decreased about 4,700, and that's based off the 2022 census that came out. We're down 571 adult population. So over the next 10 years, we're going to see that decrease each year.
So that won't be adjusted. We gotta live with that number for 10 years.
The debt service levy, that was a change of almost 3,100. Reasons: the district is required to levy 105% for the scheduled debt service payment so that there are enough funds available to make the bond payments, even if the taxpayers are delinquent in making their tax payments. Excess funds have accumulated and are being used to pay a portion of the bond payments. This decrease, along with the increase in the bond payments, results in lowering the tax burden for the taxpayers. The reduction in maximum levy allowed. So our Q-comp, that's our alternative teacher compensation. This was included in the maximum that we levied back in, what was that, September. That will be taken out, so that's a 35%. That's 35% of the total calculated revenue, and won't be included in the final levy. This is money that, so the remaining 65 is revenue that we do receive from the state, so we just don't put it on to the taxpayer. This next slide, it's the levy comparison of pay 22 and pay 21. So pay 22, we're going to be levying $2,625,119, and then you can see there the prior year was the $2,637,000, so it's a difference of $12,000. So $12,000 less we'll be levying. Next slide is just subtotals by category. So of that $2,625,000, about $93,000 is voter approved, and then the remaining comes from the state or other funds. Other factors impacting tax changes. This could be an increase or decrease in assessed valuation of individual property, an increase or decrease in total value of property in the district, legislation decisions, voter-approved referendums, and actions taken by other taxing entities. So slide 32, our next steps. The board will accept public comments and questions on proposed levy. The board will certify the 2021 payable 2022 property tax levy as listed below.
Resolution. When that time comes.
Then we can open it up for comments.
You know, I think there's a couple things here. A lot of people think that their taxes go up, but remember the value of their property could go up. Also, there is, like, for example, Echo, there's a tax increment financing. Basically, it's a district, so they're not paying taxes on the improvement of that elevator over there. And that helps out your community. Same thing was done in Clarkfield when they improved that elevator. Pretty common practice. And so that impacts the second one there. That causes an increase in total value of all the property, but then that's spread out.
And Jeremy, just to clarify, the Clarkfield pool isn't really a burden on the school district, it's the
It's
Previous
taxed on the old school district, the old Clarkfield School District.
Correct? Okay.
Yeah. But we're the, you know, we're the authority,
Right, I just wanted to,
we're the taxing authority.
I saw it on here, I just
Yeah,
loud for those not listening.
that's a good point, yeah.
And then the last slide, if there are questions, I can address questions related to the school portion of it, but then anything else I would refer back to the counties.
Yeah, ultimately, you know, the county sends out that tax bill, that tax statement. They're really the ones that should provide a lot of the explanation for the value of your property, those taxes.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much, Jeremy. We will
Thank you.
vote on that later in the meeting. Next item is our fiscal year 2021 audit report. Hoffman and
You're up.
Probst. Kyle Kruger, just in time. Don't even have time to take your jacket off.
Do you guys have copies of the slides and?
Yep.
And the
Think
audit
so.
report and things?
It's on the, on the board book, right?
Yep.
You have a number of hard copies of the audit report here. Jeremy also threw NBCC's in here as well. So maybe I'll just leave those with you, if that works. And I will not go through the whole audit report as usual. I will just discuss some of the high points, the opinion, the findings, that sort of thing. If at any point you have any questions, just interrupt, or if you want me to elaborate on anything, or you want hard copies of the report or anything, just interrupt me. I'll work through it pretty quickly. There wasn't a whole lot going on that required elaboration this year, but I'll do a quick breakdown of some of the financial highlights, go through each fund briefly and the results of what happened in each fund. First, in terms of the results of the audit, you'll notice if you look at the Auditor's Report, one of the first pages is titled Independent Auditor's Report. In there, you'll see your opinion, which you'll find says that the statements are presented fairly in all material respects, etc., some accounting jargon. But basically, what that means is we reviewed the balances in your financial statements and we feel they're accurate enough to use, by bonding companies, the members of your districts, etc. And just a point of note, a pat on the back to Jeremy, Leanne, Tara, Denise, Rich, everyone involved in the process. But we issued that opinion this year with no audit adjustment findings, which is an accomplishment. It's not easy with the level of activity going on in the district to get everything exactly right, and everything looked great this year. So, in terms of findings, I won't go through those in detail either, but I'm happy to say that we had one minor finding this year related to the single audit. We reviewed the CRF program and the summer food service program, which is very confusing, but the lunches provided during the school year were technically under the summer food service program. You'll notice that in the audit report, but that's what that means. It was an extension of that program that covered the full school year to allow you guys to provide free lunches. And everything looked great in that review. There was one minor issue noted of not having a procurement policy in place, and being as it was the first year of a single audit, that was to be expected. But based on my discussions with the staff in the office, it appears that will be in place soon if it isn't already. So everything in terms of audit results was very good. In terms of financial highlights, if you're following along, I'll be on the first slide after the title page. And your general fund increased about $80,000 during the fiscal year. And at the end of the year, you have a fund balance of just over $3.1 million. The unassigned fund balance in the general fund is about $2.1 million. And that, just for a little point of reference, amounts to almost 18% of your annual budgeted expenditures. And that's a solid number considering your goal as a district is to maintain 12% of your annual budgeted expenditures in your unassigned fund balance. So a very good result in your general fund. Another note in terms of budgeting going forward, you'll notice when you review the general fund balances that your assigned for the projected budget deficit increased about $240,000. So if you're curious as to what that's based on, that is your planned revenues over expenditures for the following year. So in your 2021 financials, you'll note that you'll have a projected budget deficit assignment of about $320,000. So just a little background, that's what that means. And of course, you received a fairly significant increase in federal funding during the year due to COVID and the related programs that the federal government offered. The COVID relief fund, CRF, ESSER, EAR, any other acronym you want to throw in there. You received in total about $750,000 in that COVID-related money, and that's what triggered that single audit for fiscal year 21. So I would anticipate, based on my conversations with some of the staff, that 2022 will be another round of single audits, so something to look forward to. But as long as, you know, you maintain a similar distribution in spending, I would imagine we'll again look at a food service program, and depending on which COVID program you spend the most money out of, I'm guessing that will be the second program again next year. So just a heads up on that. And one major highlight on the second page of the district highlight slides is the storm damage. Of course, you guys did extensive repairs to the building as a result of that storm. So I broke that down in terms of dollar amounts in the slide. You'll see that during the fiscal year 2021, we incurred nearly $1 million in costs. After year end, through the report of through the date of our audit report, which was November 19th, you incurred an additional $800,000 roughly. So you can see you're pushing the $1.9 million mark in terms of costs related to the repairs. And as of the date of our report, you received over $2 million in insurance proceeds, and about $1 million of that is reported in your financials as a deferred or unearned revenue, which means you got the money but had not yet spent it as of year end. A couple of notes regarding, you know, the future, things to look forward to. Obviously, COVID-19, as I touched on, is not going away, and neither are the programs that the federal government's offering for the time being. So, you know, what your impacts will be in terms of, you know, how far that goes into the future, we're not sure, but obviously next year you're set to receive a substantial amount of money again, and hopefully that offsets any of the costs you may incur, whether, you know, we need to go any further into PPE, distance learning, that sort of thing. We hope not, but you will be receiving some funds going forward that'll hopefully ease some of that burden if needed. The legislature passed a formula increase for 2022-23. That's a standard operating procedure. That formula that we're referencing is how your Gen Ed aid and things like that are calculated. So that increased. And in terms of your future enrollment, which is another component of how some of your aids are calculated, you'll see a visual aid on the next slide. And as you know, you have a downward trend in terms of your enrollment numbers. Very common out in this area. A lot of the districts we work with have a similar projection. So nothing to be alarmed about, just something to be aware of, as I'm sure you all are. I'll get into a few charts that break down the financials for the year. If you're all following along, I am looking at the fund balance versus cash balance analysis. This will show a red line, which represents or bar, which represents your cash balances, and the blue bar represents your ending fund balance over the last 5 years. And you can see they're very consistent in terms of their relationship, with the exception of 2021. You see a large increase in your cash versus your fund balance ratio. And that, again, is due to the large inflow of cash related to those insurance proceeds and those remaining unspent at year-end 21. The next slide, there's a couple of pie charts side by side that show your general fund revenues by source. And very consistent across the board. There's a couple exceptions. You'll note sales and other conversions of assets went from a rounded 0% last year to almost 10% this year. And your insurance proceeds the revenue recognized from that is in that sales and other conversions, so that's the driver behind the increase there. And of course, your revenue from federal sources had a fluctuation in there due to the COVID monies, and that also affected some of the other ratios. So, all in all, things are fairly consistent with the exception of the COVID money and the activity related to the storm damage. The next chart will give you a similar picture. This is revenues by source in the form of a bar chart that shows the last 5 years. Again, very consistent from year to year. You will notice the far right-hand bar in each grouping. For me, it's kind of a light green, blue color. Again, represents sales and other conversions of assets, which is where the insurance proceeds are. But you'll notice that is much higher in 2021 than the previous 4 years. Again, related to storm damage. The next slide will break down your expenditures. And again, very stable, very good to see those staying, at a stable level over the years. Of course, your largest proportion of that pie is related to salaries and benefits. That's very typical, obviously, in a school district. Most of your resources are going to teachers and administrative staff. You may notice a slight change in your capital outlay. Your capital expenditures in 21 are 9%, in 20 they are 5%. That, again, primarily relates to a number of those repairs flowing through your 500 object codes, which are what we call capital outlay codes, in your general ledger. So, next slide shows.
Can I ask one question, Kyle?
Yep.
So on this slide where it says purchase services at 34%, does that include MPCC?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. that
Just
would-
want to clarify that, thank you.
Yep, and that
Okay.
also would include a significant amount of work done on the storm damage as well. Will be in the purchase services side. You don't see the impact as much there, but some of the impacts of that project will be noticed as you look through the detail in some purchase services accounts and maybe some supplies type accounts in your financial statements. But you are correct, that's where MVCC would be reflected. Expenditures by object over 5 years is the next chart. And again, you'll notice it's very consistent, which is a good sign. There's not a lot of fluctuation. The small pink bar on the far right-hand side of each grouping is your capital expenditures. You can see there's quite an increase there. Also, as was just brought up by Sharon, the purple line is your purchase services. So although you don't really see that reflected in that pie chart on the previous page, you will see that there's quite a bit of an increase in your purchase services, and that's where some of that storm damage is hitting. The next slide gives some general fund expenditures from kind of a different perspective. It groups them together by function. So you'll notice your administrative and support services, your regular instruction, vocational instruction, exceptional instruction, it's broken out to give you an idea of total expenditures by activity. So you'll notice very consistent across the board. Regular instruction, where you're obviously dedicating most of your resources. You'll notice that chart should kind of follow your enrollment trend over that time. And an outlier, you'll see in site and buildings, the orange bar there, again, is due to storm damage. So that's why that's significantly higher in 2021. The next slide will give you a breakdown of your general fund revenue and expenditures by fiscal year over the last 5 years, as well as a comparison with the budget. So you'll see 2017 through 2020, very consistent in terms of where you are in budget versus actual. You're very close to budget at the end of the year, which is phenomenal. And 2021, of course, a very strange year with your storm damage, the COVID made budgeting very difficult. But you are still, in the general vicinity, which is great. Knowing what we know now with all the variables, it turned out very well. So you'll see revenues were fairly lower than the budget, about 8.8, almost 9%, but expenditures were also less than budget, right in that 10% range. So they kind of offset each other, and at the end of the day, in terms of your overall net income or change in fund balance, were very accurate in terms of budget. Next slide will give you some significant detail on your general fund. So this is kind of an income statement presented multiple years side by side. And everything is, as I said, very consistent. One thing you may notice up in your revenues, revenue from federal sources is almost $700,000 in 2021, up from about $300,000 last year. That's where you're seeing your COVID grants hit your financial, and capital outlay under expenditures is up over $1 million, and that had historically hovered around $500,000. So seeing some significant fluctuations there for the reasons we've already discussed. Aside from that, everything is very consistent, which is what you want to see. The last couple of slides, I'll just hit on each fund and how things went. We went in depth into the general fund there. I won't say too much more about that, but in terms of your other funds, food service, you had an increase in your fund balance or net income, I guess you could call it, in the fund of about $10,000. Again, the primary driver there is the COVID funding. You received a significant amount of funding to provide free lunches, and basically the cost to provide those was less than the funding you received. So positive result in the food service fund. Community service fund went down about $40,000. This is primarily due to an increase in purchase services and a decrease in tuition and fees from patrons. Interest earnings also declined significantly, which we're seeing is kind of a pattern across a lot of districts. Banks are lowering their rates. And that's not a poor place to invest money. The community service fund is where you'll have a lot of your school readiness and ECFE type programs. So that's a good place to be dedicating some funds. And as of year-end 21, you did have a fund balance of $256,000 in that fund. So debt service fund, you went backwards in terms of fund balance by about $23,000. But this is one of those funds where you actually want to see a loss, I guess you could call it. As you pay down debt, and And this is something that's regulated by the state, as they monitor your fund balance, and they don't want it to get too high. So if that fund balance were ever to get to a point that was too high based on their review, they may manipulate your levy or things like that. So, so as you pay down your debt, you want to see that fund balance come down, and that's what you're seeing. Your OPEB activity, so you have your debt service fund for your OPEB bond and your revocable trust fund. We're, pretty much in line with previous years. Your OPEB debt service fund, so you had an increase, a very slight increase of about $3,000. That's similar to your debt service fund. As you go down the road in terms of paying that bond down, you should start seeing your fund balance decrease in that fund as well. And your trust fund, it looked a little different this year. There were some early retirement incentives in there, and also some substitute teachers, just off the top of my head from my recollection, moved to a sub-role. So that made the activity in the fund look a little abnormal, but all ended up looking good at the end of the day. It's just the way it was reported differed from the previous year slightly, where the subs in question, and it may just be one, it may be multiple, I'm not sure off the top of my head, but they had their contributions pulled out of their paycheck, so it ran through the general fund. But their expenses were still coming out of that OPEB fund as normal. And that's just a function of them being brought back on the payroll, basically. Whereas a normal retiree, their contributions will still flow through that OPEB trust fund. So, all in all, everything looked very good, very consistent with previous years, aside from a couple of oddball events that I mentioned and that you are all well aware of. I don't have much else in the way of information. Any questions or concerns you guys have? Great. Well, as always, we appreciate you guys allowing us to be involved. We enjoy it. It's a great project we work on. Jeremy, great year. Your first one went well, I thought. So, if you guys need anything from us, let us know. Otherwise, I will leave this box with Jeremy for reports. So, if you have bedtime reading.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much, Kyle.
Thank you.
See you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Have a great night and a Merry Christmas.
Thank
Same
you.
to you.
You too.
You want me to just throw that in the office?
Next report is Indian Policies and Procedures Report with Roberta Burkasek.
Good evening. I don't have too much to go over. I think you're all familiar with the Indian policies and procedures. They will need approval later on, but the policies and procedures are required by the impact aid law because we claim children who reside on eligible Indian lands for our impact aid. And so they require policies and procedures to be in place at Yellow Medicine East. And so we have those, just some highlighted ones. The first policy is that we must disseminate the application so that the tribe is aware of what we have on, like the applications and the evaluation and the program plans and information, etc. The other policies that are in place are that we will provide the Upper Sioux community and the parents opportunity for them to share their views. We usually do that through the Parent Advisory Committee or also here at the board. They're able to make their comments. We meet with the Board of Trustees regularly. Those kinds of meetings allow for parents to, obviously they're allowed to call anytime principals of the buildings. Annually assess the extent to which Native students are participating. Every spring, I bring forth a report about the comparison between how our Native children are faring with activities and academics as well in comparison to non-Native students. And then how we modify the IPPs if necessary. And then how we would respond to that in writing if there were changes that the Native parents would like to see in place. And then providing a copy of Indian policies and procedures to the Upper Sioux community. So those are the highlights or the policies that are written in this Indian policies and procedures. So does anybody have any questions about this or anything else tonight?
I think so.
I'll probably be back in a couple months. I saw that I had a thing that I have to do the annual concurrence, so I'll be back again in a couple months to chat with you again.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Thank you, Bert.
Thanks.
I've been meeting pretty regularly with the Parent Advisory Committee.
Very regularly, and one of the exciting things that's happening too that I could talk about is that when we asked the students about who wanted to be the student representative on the Parent Advisory Committee, we had 5 or 6 kids that wanted to, 9th through 12th grade, that wanted to be on the Parent Advisory Committee. So we just said, why don't we all just meet occasionally, and then if someone feels comfortable to come to the Parent Advisory Committee, then you'll just come. And the students, they call themselves the Student Representative Committee. And they've been meeting during advisory time quite regularly with Tiana, who's the community cultural liaison. And they have just been taking up initiative after initiative after initiative, and they come to the Parent Advisory Committee. There's probably 3 or 4 that come regularly to the Parent Advisory Committee and share what they've been working on with Tiana. And they have such great ideas and some really wonderful things that they're working on, and really sharing their opinions and ideas. And it's really, really been fun to hear from the students themselves about things that they want to see and issues that they have and concerns that they have, and some really fun ideas they have. And so it's been really fun. So you'll probably hear from some of them in the future about issues that they want to bring forward or changes they want to see or things like that. So
And we'd welcome that.
Yeah.
I think we'd welcome that, so.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
we have that approval on later in our agenda. Okay, thank you, Bert. Next reports were Burt Rainey Elementary report and Wyoming High School Middle School report with Mrs. Hanson and Mr. Kent, but they are absent tonight. So Mr. Schneider will give us briefly a report from them as well as district report.
So I'm just going to hit a few highlights here. One of the things that Mrs. Hanson outlined is her Birds Club. So that's one of the areas that we are going to try and use some of our ESSER dollars on to try and address any loss of learning or lack of gain, however you want to word that. But right now they're working with a group of first graders that have been identified. They're working with them 2 days a week. We want to expand that a little bit more, but we're challenged like everybody else with finding staffing for that. So we'll provide those students. In the past, we haven't even provided transportation, but this year with the ESSER dollars, we thought that would be a good use, maybe remove some of those barriers and provide transportation for those kiddos. Like I said, we're focusing on first grade immediately. Some of the math areas, our math progress, especially in our elementary, was not bad, but we can continue to grow with our MCAs. And so one of the areas they have identified as an area of weakness is math facts and number sense. The two run hand in hand. Many of us old timers remember memorizing math facts, and really what you want a kiddo to do is to be able to understand the numbers in the relationship. So they start manipulating the numbers in different ways, and they do that enough that then they actually memorize the math, and so they're a little bit quicker, because math fluency is just as important as reading So that's something else she highlighted there. And then the last thing I want to hit upon is our Lego League challenge was this last weekend. They did pretty good. I'll let you read about that, but there's a picture there of that. So pretty good information there from her painting. For the middle school and high school, the choir performed at the Rock and Citizens Alliance Bank. That's kind of an annual thing every year. Thank you. My voice maybe was picked up by everybody else's microphone anyway, kind of a loud mouth. We do have some students taking our MRV CTEC courses. Those are a collaborative of CTE. Right now we have carpentry as one of them that we had this semester. So we're adding more of that. So 13 students there. We're always driving to try and get a few more of those courses or a few more students into those courses. Fruit delivery was last Friday. That's a big event every fall. Takes a lot of resources. Semi pulls in with all that fruit and the students sort it out and get that distributed out. Choir concert tonight starts at 7. And then something that the art department, Mrs. Eisfeld's class is doing is what's called projection mapping. I'd like to say I understand that a lot better. But if you follow that YouTube, I did watch it. It's pretty cool in how that works and how they can do that all from here, the New York skyline from here. It's pretty cool. It gets students excited. I think it's a good skill for our students to learn about, especially those with an interest in that area. And then the Hive Award drawing this month was won by Angie Chance and Matt Hafer. And then the last item was kind of new. We do have a long-term sub for social studies. Mrs. Runya is done on Friday. And so Gretchen Sietsma is going to take over through the end of that leave there when Mrs. S. Leeson comes back January 17th. So we'll hand off from one long-term sub to the next long-term sub and get that finished out until she gets back. Okay? Questions about either one of those? I probably am not a lot of help if you do have them, but
Appreciate that.
let me jump
Present
into
here.
mine.
You're up.
All right. Auditorium Reconstruction, so hopefully it's getting some good use tonight. Tonight's our big, really our first time using it again since the musical. We did have some problems with the seats, so the installer had to come back, put some anchors in and epoxy in some ready bolt. We're expecting that that will resolve any issues we did have, but we'll continue to watch it very carefully. There are a number of things that we still need to resolve, and I'm sorry I didn't put our list from Building and Grounds on there, but there's a number of things that on our punch list that we will get going on. The doors, it hasn't changed. It's still sometime in February when those will be installed. COVID update, our numbers are pretty low. One thing though we did experience, parents are starting to send their students when some of their students will have symptoms. Remember, for this really to work, we really want parents to understand if your kid's even close, keep them home. All right, we might be dealing with a few here that as a result of parents probably just not understanding that, and it is a hardship on parents sometimes. When they're working outside the home, they have a hard time finding childcare. But they're sending those kiddos, and so we really are trying to emphasize again that those students need to stay home if they're experiencing any symptoms. So, but our numbers are quite good at this point. Sitelogic facility analysis update, we are working through that. We submitted a comfort survey and now we're going through a functional analysis. Eventually in January, they will meet with a group of staff members to explore their ideas just to ask them some more specific questions. Now, those surveys went out to you folks too. I encourage you to fill them out also. That's not just for staff, it's for you folks, because you do have quite a bit of oversight of this building. Substitutes, I think you've seen that on the news. That's a big problem. It continues to be a big problem here. No matter what, a day does not go by where we don't have positions that are unfilled. We're kind of hoping that if some college students here during the break can hop in and help us out a little bit, at least we can get maybe some more coverage for our paraprofessionals in that area. So if you know of anybody, we'll get them in there. If you can just refer them to us, to myself, one of the principals, or Tara. Roughly 70.67% of our positions are filled, so we still have several, about 30% of our positions are unfilled on any given day. We'll look at a vaccine clinic. We're starting to work through that with the Minnesota Department of Health. That will not be done by us, but we will help them advertise and we will give them access to our facility. Obviously, no student will be forced to be vaccinated. We will just get that information out there. We think it's a convenience for families if they want to do that. With that, we're able to tie in boosters, and walk-ins are available. So we're working on that. That won't happen here yet this month. We'll look at that in January.
That's COVID vaccines?
Correct?
Because I am old enough to remember getting other vaccines in school.
Yeah.
So I just want to clarify. COVID
Yeah, what was
vaccines.
it? It was about 10 years ago, the bird flu? That was done in school too, wasn't it? That
I
was
believe
maybe the
so.
most
Yeah,
recent one?
it was.
Avian bird flu? Or
Maybe.
Well, and flu
Yeah,
shots
H1N1.
as well every year.
H1N1.
What's that?
H1N1.
You also do flu shots.
Yeah,
Every year.
we do those after hours though too.
Yep.
So, I'm not going to hold any children for shots, that's for sure. So, school attorney, so Kevin Rupp, as we have talked about, or I've sent out, Kevin Rupp is retiring, so I was contacted by Trevor Helmerson from the same partnership. So we will, it's my intent to continue with that. That contract will come here in January or February for the following year. Basically, they're on retainer. As a reminder, only Sharon or myself should contact that attorney. So if you have questions, just speak to one of us first. Also, don't be afraid to reach out to MSBA. That's just somebody that can provide you with some insight too, and that's free of charge. So, MSBA Leadership Conference is January 13th and 14th. I did make reservations at Crave Restaurant for 7:15 that evening of the 13th. If we're interested in transportation, I know we have another board meeting before that week, in fact. You just have to let me know and I'll make that arrangement. So, one other item that really wasn't, or two other items that wasn't on there, we did receive word that we received a gift of $15,000 from the Kurt and Jeanette Olson Foundation. We'll use, the first thing we're going to do is purchase wireless microphones for our fine arts program. That is something, ours were outdated, and so they need to be replaced. And then the second thing they approved is a storage shed for our preschool trikes, and then any proceeds left from that, they'd like to purchase more trikes for our preschoolers. So, CEO, that program we have talked about in the past. One thing I want to encourage you, if you would be willing to serve on that board, those meetings are during the day, but they're an hour long. If you could contribute, we really need a school representative / community representative to serve in that capacity. We had a meeting today. The intent is to launch that in the fall of 2023. So we have about a year and a half to learn about it. You don't have to know anything right now. You would be entering at a good time to learn about it, so you know what that program is. So if you would ever consider that, if you could make that work for the majority of the meetings, that would be awesome. So, questions about any of that?
I got one. So with the principals not here, has there been some discussion on the visitor policy? I know we've talked about a couple of things in the last week pertaining to certain services and stuff.
Yeah, so I believe it was asked about IEP meetings, that parents could attend in person. They're just going to have to advocate for themselves, and we can allow some of that. We're trying to be a little cautious and not put too many people in the same room at one time. But if they're feeling that the services or the meeting's not productive, they should reach out to the principal, and the principal will work with them to do that.
You said the parents should have to advocate themselves for the meeting. I have a little trouble with that statement. I feel like we should be offering that to them if that's, or at least letting them know that that's an option. They could either pick that or online. I don't feel like a parent should have to ask that the meeting be in person when they were told it should be online. So I feel that could be a little bit confusing.
Okay. I'll talk to the principals on how we can handle that.
Yeah.
And I guess the other question to throw out, obviously we have a incident command team meeting coming up in a couple weeks. You know, at what point do we start looking at where we're at with visitors back in the building? I think some of the community is a little bit confused with all the big activities that take place at the school and them being locked out from coming in, say, to pick up kids.
So, well, I don't know if they're locked out to pick up kids. I'm sorry if that's the impression we're leaving. But if we consider like the activities themselves, those are in the evening, all right? Our staff, some of them probably do go, but they aren't in close proximity to one another.
So would that
In most
include like
cases.
ECFE that takes place in the evenings too, or how does that fall?
Yeah, you know, that's one of those things I did put on the COVID leadership team
I know.
agenda for next time, how that might look.
Okay.
That would be another after-school activity that could happen.
Okay.
We may run into the same problem we're having with some of our other after-school programs, and that's staffing for those events.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to our item number 7, celebrations and recognitions. So first from Burt Rainey Elementary, thank you to the preschool staff for their continued support in assisting with covering preschool staffing needs. Your ability to be flexible and take on extra duties is amazing. Thank you for all you do for our Little Stingers preschool program. Thank you to Mr. Schuler for your weekly celebrity
Celebrity
impersonations for our Sting Pride winners each week. Your humor and positive attitude shine through on a daily basis at BRE, and we appreciate all you do for our students and staff at BRE. Thank you to Angie Olson for organizing many BRE activities. Your organizational skills are top-notch, and you help make things run smoothly and efficiently. You are so appreciated. Thank you to Pete Scheffler and Cindy Lavin for all of your behind-the-scenes work for our ELL programming. Your expertise and time are appreciated. And thank you to the BRE staff members who are currently providing after-school programming, also known as Bert's Club, for first graders in the areas of literacy and social emotional learning. Your time and extra efforts for our first graders are appreciated. And from the Wyoming Middle School High School, Mrs. Dack works tremendously hard to provide strong opportunities for her students. She is very collaborative and flexible and ensures students are at the center of each decision that she makes. Thanks for all of your hard work, Mrs. Dack. Barb Torkey is always willing to step in and fill in where needed. She establishes strong relationships with students and goes above and beyond to meet the needs of the students that she works with. Thanks for all you do, Barb. Sue Bones provides a critical service to the students at the middle school, high school. She goes above and beyond for our students, working hard to ensure that they have access to services and ensure their success within and outside of school. Thanks for everything that you do, Sue. And from the district, thank you to Leah Schuler and Brennan Kent for collaborating together to gather failure rate data and make every effort possible to get students that have struggled to get caught up on their credits needed for graduation and future careers. Their creativity has been very helpful in providing the hope of meeting graduation requirements for our students. And thank you to Sue Bones and Lisa Hansen for their work on our McKinney-Vento process for identifying homeless students and ensuring that our students are provided with appropriate support and services. Your work in developing a plan to submit has helped us streamline the process of identifying and providing support for our students and families. And I have one additional shout out from a staff member. Thank you to Lisa Hansen, Brennan Kent, and Rich Schneider for your tireless commitment to YME staff and students. You know your why, and it shows. Okay, moving on. We do have one other celebration and recognition for our board members, Jeremy LeBlanc and Matt Zempel. They have completed the MSBA Leadership Development Program, and we commend those two for completing that program. It's quite a time commitment, so we appreciate you. Mr. Schneider does have some certificates for you. Okay. So thank you both.
Sharon, can I be excused for the choir concert?
Yep.
See you guys after bed.
Thank you.
Next item is committee reports. The policy committee met on November 17th. The notes here.
You know, one of the things that Kyle talked about is we will look at a federal purchasing contract protocol and authority, so that will become a policy for us. So going through that.
And the one thing I remember about that was we didn't have that current policy because we did not receive the necessary or the required amount of
We didn't,
money. But with COVID relief and those funds coming in, we now had to, am I saying that right, Jeremy? Okay, so we had to, we should have had that policy in
We're
place.
required to do a single audit if we have over $750,000.
Okay.
Yeah, and if that audit wouldn't have been done, we wouldn't have known. It's good to have it.
Sure.
I would say we're looking at probably the next 3 years. with the
Sure.
planning to have one.
Okay. So yeah, that is on the radar of the policy committee. And then.
We looked up some
go
standard
ahead.
policy renewals.
Yeah, we had a lot of policies that are going to come up for renewal, and that committee has some work cut out for us next year.
Some reading,
Yeah, a lot of reading.
some light reading.
So, but I appreciate the work that it took to organize all of that, Rich, so thank you for doing that. Anything else anyone want to add on that meeting? Negotiations committee met December 23rd and December 9th with EMYME, and we're still in that process. had a good discussion on December 9th. Good conversation.
I would agree.
Yep, it was, yeah, excellent. Finance Committee met December 1st. Jeremy, do you have anything that?
Yeah, so I guess on the Finance Committee, we talked a little bit about COVID stipends, if any, how we would maybe use some of that to compensate for extra work that has happened with the past work that's been done with COVID, both with staff and, more importantly, the school nurse with the extra work she's put in. At this time, all the conversations have kind of been tabled, or at least the decisions have been tabled, to gather a little bit more data to make decisions off of, and then also to see how the union contract negotiations play out with EMYME. We spent quite a bit of time talking about ESSER funds and the fund balances there, with where we've spent money, what we have left in each ESSER, I guess, whether it be 1, 2, or 3. 1 being completely gone. We have some ESSER 2 money yet that we have unallocated that we're trying to make some decisions on. And ESSER 3 dollars are not available to us yet. Rich, maybe correct me on that, we're still waiting for some more guidance from state to make those
We've
decisions.
submitted our application, so
Yep.
that will be the next step, and we're hoping that if that's approved, which we anticipate, the second time we submitted our application, we followed it to a T.
Mm-hmm.
That we'll use on things like the Buzz Club and Bert's Club. And we have 3 years to expend that money, or through 2024, September 30th of 2024. So we have some time, even if we don't get a big chunk of that ESSER 3 spent this year, we still have additional time.
We spent some time talking about declining enrollment. As we know, it's a factor. We see the charts throughout our audit, and we see it in our reports every month. That's continuing to be a factor on our budget, and something we have to think of as we move forward with the budgets we create from here moving on. And then we talked a little bit about negotiations, but not too much, because there's still a lot fluid going there. That was about it. Anything else that I forgot?
And then Buildings and Grounds Committee met on December 8th. A report from them.
Yeah, I
Let me-
didn't attach my thing.
Yeah.
Spent quite a bit of time looking
Yeah.
at seats.
We talked quite a bit about vape centers and decided to move forward with 21 of those to get them in the building, get them working. Hopefully they can help us out with managing some of those concerns that we've been having with student usage of that, and maybe trying to deter that a little bit. Talked about a possible HVAC upgrade for the gymnasium, the main gymnasium. We're very early stages of that, getting some guidance on what we could do for a bid package to even put that out for pricing. So we're in the early stages of considering that. Made the decision to go ahead with 2 additional security cameras, one in the auditorium on the lower level, and then another one for BRE to be cast on the new playground area for the preschool playground. And then discussed the shot clock, purchasing shot clocks. Minnesota State High School League has made a requirement, I think it's for a 23-24 season, that we must have shot clocks in use for varsity sports. So Tim got a proposal from Supervision, which is the company that has our scoreboards, for their shot clock addition package that'll integrate with the scoreboards we have. So not cheap, probably in the neighborhood of $14,000, but something that has to be done per Minnesota High School League. So that's kind of where we're at with that. Talked about some of the unbudgeted capital outlay, long-term facilities maintenance expenditures, some for the wrestling room tiles, and then additional iPads. Discussed the Sitelogic facility assessment a little bit, but wasn't a whole lot to talk about there, since they're in the middle of that. We're waiting for that comprehensive report in the spring. Went over our auditorium updates, discussions Rich had with Sitelogic about where we're at with our project and trying to get that to the finish line. It's been a long time. We're a little behind schedule, and we've let them know what we're not happy about that. And then put together our punch list of items that we have yet to finish up. And then also discussed lead in the water. There was 5 areas or 5 faucets throughout the facilities, both BRE and the high school, where they found high levels of lead in the water. So we're making the repairs to those areas and then just vacating some of the other areas where they're not necessarily needed. One was an extra water fountain in the elementary where there's one right next to it, so we can just shut that water fountain off and not use it. And then room 210 had a fountain in it. I'm not sure which room that was, if that was elementary. That was BRE. It was Burt Rainey, I'm sorry. That had a high faucet, so we're able to not use that one. And then there was a faucet in the staff lounge that we could no longer use until that's fixed as well.
Is that testing done by a certain company, or
Yep,
did we have to do
IEA
it?
comes in, and then, so we don't have the results back, so the 2 up there that were elevated, that we wanted them to recheck, the kitchen faucet kettle and the concession stand faucet, they retest those. So they came in last week. We don't have the results back yet, so no.
And they do that annually?
Yes.
Okay.
That's not common, or it's common for a building our age to have these problems.
Sure.
So,
Talked about a sample playground layout a little bit, and talked about an estimated price tag of $300,000 for that. Not that we're moving forward with that right now, but definitely if you look at our playground, it's something we need to start talking about, and hopefully we can move forward with sooner than later, at least getting the ground going to start funding something like that. So no timeline and no equipment picked out on that yet, but just considerations of $300,000 is kind of the basic starter set, if you want to call it that, and they can go up from there.
Which playground?
The main playground, the one between the elementary and the football field.
I think like one of the slides is closed already.
Yeah, one of the slides it's actually taken down, and there's plywood over the hole where it was because it's broken, and it's hard, or can't find replacements that would fit that because they're just not made for that old equipment anymore. So, and I think there's quite a few other areas that are deteriorating on it where it's past its serviceable life and needs to be updated. And then we reviewed our capital outlay and long-term facilities maintenance spreadsheet, which is the budget we've kind of set throughout the year. We kind of talked about where we're at and what we have left yet to go on that. And that was it.
Okay, a lot.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you very much. And we'll move on to item number 9, personnel items, leave requests and resignations. We have a leave of absence request for Hispanic liaison Erica Laus, military leave of absence, Burt Rainey Elementary paraprofessional Kylie Pagan, and accept a resignation of middle school, high school paraprofessional Kaylee Galvez. Is there a motion to approve those leave requests and resignations?
Motion to approve by Odegaard.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second by Zempel.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next item is a new hire. Is there a motion to approve the employment of pre-K-12 paraprofessional substitute Alyssa Hidalgo? Is there a motion to approve?
Motion by LeBlanc to approve hiring Alyssa Hidalgo.
Thank you. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second by Zempel.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next item is the approval of Indian policies and procedures that we heard from Berta. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion by Odegaard to approve the Indian policies and procedures. as presented.
Thank you. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Amanda Lisi, second.
Thank you. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next item is approval of Memorandum of Understanding with Education Minnesota, YME. And this was discussed at our meeting last month. Is there a motion to approve the Memorandum of Understanding with Education Minnesota, YME?
Motion by LeBlanc to approve the memorandum of understanding with the MYME.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second by Zempel.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I didn't
Hearing-
see any changes, correct? No
what-
questions.
I believe what was on board book is
Same.
the one they voted on. Yep. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any other discussion? Okay. Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next item is a resolution directing administration to make recommendations on the reduction of programs and positions due to declining enrollment. Is there a motion to approve?
Is this a resolution?
Hmm?
Oh,
You have a question?
It's a yearly resolution, I think.
I make the motion.
Thank you, Amanda. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second by Zempel.
There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, this is a resolution, so we'll do roll call vote. Start at my right.
Matt Zempel, yes.
Dawn Odegaard, yes.
Sharon Rupp, yes.
Jeremy LeBlanc, yes.
Amanda Lisi, yes.
Motion carries. Next item is approval of contract with Sdsu to provide the supervision of student teachers during field experience. This was a new one. The contract is out on board book. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve by Zempel.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second by LeBlanc.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I have a question. This is new with this institution. Do we have other contracts with other
No, we were
colleges?
talking about that. We don't think so. We think this must be a new, I don't know if it's giving them some exposure or if they have to now have this in order to place a student with us.
So it could be a college, university thing where they can't without this agreement. It's just something I've not seen before, so I was curious about why. Is there any concerns that we have by agreeing to this contract on our part?
I didn't see anything that committed us to anything. It allows for the flexibility of, there were a few things for payment on there, but we can't hire them. That's allowed us to pay them for substituting, but in the state of Minnesota, they can't substitute for us while doing their student teaching.
Okay. Go ahead.
That was a new one for me too. Okay, there's a
Maybe ask around to the other superintendents and see if
I'm
I'm
just-
missing something with the other colleges.
I mean, I'm sure we've had students from SMSU, the University of Minnesota.
Yeah, that was just last year, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just unique.
Like,
And maybe it's because they're a South Dakota school and we're a Minnesota school, and therefore they need a contract outside of the state. Could be that simple.
maybe. Sharon brought up a good point when we were talking before. It's kind of like the preschool student, they'll get their foot in the door. Maybe they'll like it here. And so maybe that's what student teaching.
Not a bad idea.
Yeah. Great question. There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. We are on item 9.6, Ron? Okay. And that is to adopt a resolution to certify the 2021 payable 2022 levy, and this is the presentation that Jeremy Wilcox presented earlier. So is there a motion to adopt a resolution to certify that levy?
Amanda Lisi will make the motion.
Thank you. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second by LeBlanc.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, this is a resolution, so we'll do roll call vote. Start with Director Zempel.
Matt Semple, yes.
Dawn Odegaard, yes.
Sharon Rupp, yes.
Jeremy LeBlanc, yes.
Amanda Lisi, yes.
Ron Winter, yes.
Motion carries. Item number 10 is policy update. I guess we talked mostly about our policies in our policy committee update. There are no more discussion items. The one correspondence, the MREA Board of Directors election ballot I completed. So that leaves our upcoming events as early dismissal for Christmas break, December 22nd at 1 p.m. for students. There is no school for Christmas break, December 23rd through January 2nd, 2022. Our next board meeting is January 10th, 2022, here in the boardroom at 6 p.m. There's an early dismissal for staff development, January 12th, 2022 at 2:30. End of the second quarter is January 14th, 2022. There's no school for staff development, January 17th and 18th. And then early dismissal for staff development, January 26th at 2:30. Is there anything else? Okay. Hearing none, meeting is adjourned.